Have you ever tried to lower your heart rate beats per minute but found that almost nothing works? Well, over the past 12 months, I tested Dr. Iñigo's Millán's Zone 2 training protocol to see if it actually works. And the results are going to really surprise you. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what protocol I followed, the results I saw, and what I would do differently the next time around to get even better results. But first, I need you to hit the subscribe button below to lower your beats per minute, and then we're going to explore the work of Dr. Iñigo Millán and define exactly what Zone 2 is, in case you haven't heard of either. Best known for his work with elite athletes, Dr. Millán has coached pro cyclist Tadej Pogačar to 3 Tour de France victories. His research emphasizes the importance of Zone 2 training, which targets low-intensity exercise to enhance fat oxidation, improve mitochondrial efficiency, and optimize overall aerobic capacity. Through his work, Dr. Millán has also significantly influenced how athletes and coaches approach endurance training by blending scientific rigor and practical application. Training in Zone 2 enables our bodies to become more efficient at oxidizing fat for fuel, and it improves the lactate oxidation capacity in our muscles, both of which are key for better athletic performance. When we have a greater capacity to oxidize fat, we are better able to preserve the glycogen stores in our muscles. And the higher the amount of lactate that we can oxidize in our muscles, the less lactate is released into the bloodstream. Now, lactate in the bloodstream is that annoying thing that causes the undesirable burning sensation and soreness in our muscles. In addition to that, Zone 2 training has several benefits. It is the exercise intensity that most effectively stimulates the growth of mitochondria in our muscles and where fat oxidation is the highest. Mitochondria is the primary pathway by which lactate that's been produced by our working muscles is first oxidized and then reused as fuel through a process called the Krebs cycle, up to the point of lactate saturation in the mitochondria. Now, when lactate is saturated in the mitochondria, it is then released into the bloodstream to cause that burning sensation in our muscles. Mitochondria is also the only pathway by which fat can be oxidized. Thus, the denser and more efficient our mitochondria, the more effective we are at oxidizing fat, and the more lactate we can oxidize to be reused as fuel, resulting in the preservation of our limited glycogen stores. Well, at least all that has been demonstrated by the groundbreaking work of Dr. Iñigo Millán, who is also a prominent exercise physiologist, researcher, and professor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how on earth do I know if I'm actually exercising or training in Zone 2? The most accurate way to determine if we're training in Zone 2 is to measure our blood lactate, either in a lab setting or DIY with a blood lactate meter such as the Lactate Plus, amongst many others. Of course, these are not the most easily accessible nor affordable means to determine if we are in Zone 2. An easier method would be to use the MEF 180 formula, but you will need a fitness watch or a heart rate monitor for this. Developed by Dr. Phil Maffetone, you will subtract your age from 180, then make some minor adjustments to that number based on your current health and training experience to arrive at a number that would be your maximum aerobic heart rate. Your Zone 2 training intensity should be done just below this number. But what if you don't have a heart rate monitor or a fitness watch? Then your best option would be the talk test, whereby you should still be able to hold a conversation while training in Zone 2, albeit a bit labored. Now, assuming that you're having a conversation on your mobile phone, the person on the other line should know that you're exercising. If your conversation is so normal that the other person doesn't, your intensity is probably too low and you need to go a bit harder. But if you can't speak in full sentences, you're probably already crossing into Zone 3 and you can slow down a little bit. I'm not an elite athlete by any means, but just an ordinary guy without any extraordinary genetic advantages. Plus, I don't have a history in endurance sports. I tried competitive cycling in my teenage years, but there were always other cyclists that were heaps and bounds stronger than I was, so I gave up all modalities of endurance sports for about 30 years. But 15 months ago, at 45 years old, I decided to take up running as a sport, and during the lead up to my first marathon, I discovered Zone 2 training. I only had less than 4 months to train for my first marathon, and I ran it in 4 hours and 13 minutes. After the marathon, I decided to find out if Zone 2 training can be transformative for a mere mortal like myself and what it can do for my athletic performance over the period of 12 months. So I spent the last 12 months sweating and training in Zone 2. And the results? Well, that's the most interesting part of this video and I'll unpack them one at a time. We can't improve what we don't measure, so the first thing I did 12 months ago, on 7th of August 2023, was to do a math test, also known as a maximum aerobic function test. The purpose of this test is to help us chart our aerobic progress over time. To do a math test, warm up with an easy jog for 10 minutes and then start the test, where you run anywhere between 4 to 10 kilometers at your maximum aerobic heart rate. The results can be extrapolated in two ways, either by total time taken to run the distance or by average pace, for example minutes per kilometer or minutes per mile. It is important to keep as many variables constant as possible during the test, so when the test is repeated at a later time, the results can show us how well our aerobic function has improved over time with Zone 2 training. If you're wondering what would be the best place to do a math test, well, I did my test last August on a running track, which is probably the most controlled environment because there are no uphills and downhills, there's no traffic, and no stoplights that can get in the way. I was 45 years old then, and my maximum aerobic heart rate based on the Math 180 formula was 135. That was achieved by subtracting 45 from 180. From my training log on Strava, you can see that the distance I ran for the test was 10 kilometers in a time of 1 hour, 1 minute and 52 seconds, and my average pace was 6:07 per kilometer. Looking at my Polar Flow log, you can see that my heart rate averaged at 134 beats per minute, which is just 1 bit shy of 135. Now, you're probably wondering how fast I ran in my latest math test. Well, me too. So I'm heading to the track now to do a math test. Today's the 14th of August 2024. So it's about a week past the 12 months anniversary since I did my first math test. It's 5 a.m. and since it's that early, I'm hoping the track will be completely empty and I'll have it all to myself. Okay, I'm now at the track and I just completed a 4-kilometer easy jog as a warm-up. I'm 46 years old now, so my maximum aerobic heart rate is 134 beats, and that's based off the Math 180 formula, which is 1 beat less than what it was last year because I'm 1 year older, and that's the heart rate that I want to keep as constant as possible throughout the 10 kilometers that I'm running for the test. To keep as many variables as constant as possible, I've got the same Polar fitness watch and the same Polar heart rate strap as I used last year. I've also got the same shoes on, but this time around I've got a new Wahoo watch and a Wahoo strap, which I'm also using to record the test. So I'm going to get started with the 25 laps and I'll see you when I'm done. Okay, test done. I'm sure you want to see the numbers, and you will, but first I'm going to head home, take a shower, and I'm going to pull up the data and we can have a look at it together. See you in a bit. Okay, after 12 months of training in Zone 2, the time it took me to run 10 kilometers and an average heart rate of 134 beats per minute, and you can see that here on my Strava training log, is 57 minutes and 13 seconds with an average pace of 5:37 per kilometer. That's 30 seconds faster per kilometer than my pace 12 months ago. And over the course of a marathon, running at my new Zone 2 pace would save me slightly over 21 minutes. But we don't run marathons at our Zone 2 pace. Instead, we're more likely running at an intensity that matches the high end of our Zone 3 or low Zone 4 for most of the race. And that leads me into the next crazily amazing result I got from 12 months of diligent Zone 2 training. In August last year, I also did a 10-kilometer tempo run where I ran flat out for the distance. I ran the 10 kilometers in 50 minutes and 8 seconds at a pace of 4:53 per kilometer. It was a personal best or PB for me at the moment, and I felt like I couldn't take another step after completing the 10 kilometers. Now the craziest part is, exactly 2 weeks prior to the recording of this video, I did a workout as part of my training for an upcoming marathon. After a 4-kilometer warm-up jog, I ran 3 by 10-kilometer intervals, and between each interval, I took a 60 to 90 second break to rehydrate. Without including the warm-up, the total workout interval distance was 30 kilometers and my average pace was 4:55 per kilometer. That's including the time I stopped for all the rehydration breaks between each interval. I literally ran 3 times the distance at a faster pace. But what's most mind-boggling was that I wasn't completely spent at the end of the workout. Wait, but that's not it. Another crazy thing to show you is this other workout I did a couple of days after the last workout. As before, I started with a 4-kilometer easy jog as a warm-up before running 4 by 6.5 kilometer intervals with 2 to 2.5 minute rest between each set. The total interval workout distance was about 27 kilometers and my average pace, including all the rest breaks, was 4:49 per kilometer. That's 2.7 times the distance compared to the 10 kilometers from last year at an average pace that's faster despite including all the rest breaks. Look, I'm by no means showing all this to you to boast, but to show you that diligent Zone 2 training really works. One point to note is that for the first 11 months of my Zone 2 training, I purely trained only in Zone 2, meaning that I didn't do any training at higher intensities. I chose to train only in Zone 2 for those 11 months because I was preparing for a 100-kilometer ultra marathon, and in an event that long, I figured I would only be running in Zone 2 or less. It was only after I completed the ultra marathon that I started to include high-intensity workouts to prepare myself for an upcoming marathon 2 months later. But wait, there's a caveat. And believe me when I say this, I spent a lot of hours running in Zone 2 through the freezing rain of late autumn and snow during the cold winter. My average weekly mileage slowly increased throughout last autumn and winter to about 80 kilometers before reaching about 100 kilometers by early spring. That then increased again in early summer before peaking at about 150 kilometers per week by July. One problem that I faced over and over again through the past 12 months of training in Zone 2 was running-related injuries. Yes, my mileage did increase significantly and that was definitely a factor that caused some of those injuries. But was there anything I could have done to help mitigate that? The answer is an absolute yes. So if I had a chance to do this again, what would I have done differently? First, I would have done more hill sprints. According to Brett Hudson, a very well-respected coach that coached Dayton Ritzenheim, running short yet very steep hills at max intensity of about 10 seconds during our long aerobic building runs, aka Zone 2, are key to strengthening the muscles in our legs that can prevent running injuries. Also, I would have added a lot of short sprints at full speed of up to 8 seconds during my Zone 2 runs, as this would constantly remind my bodies and legs how to run fast. The problem with Zone 2 running is that it's slow, and when I started to add in high intensity workouts to my training, I found difficulty trying to run fast. It's like my legs were so accustomed to running at a Zone 2 pace that the moment I started running faster, it felt like I was already sprinting. The last thing that I'll do differently if I had a chance to do this all again is to incorporate a robust strength training program that's specific for runners. I'm not talking bicep curls or tricep extensions here, but instead a program that focuses on lower body and core strengthening exercises. I've now come to understand how spending time in the weights room can significantly help mitigate running injuries. Well, those are the 3 things that I'll be doing going into the upcoming off-season, but for now, I still have a big training block before an upcoming marathon happening in about 2 weeks after the release of this video. If you're interested to see how much faster I can run this marathon compared to the same race 12 months ago before I started proper Zone 2 training, hit the subscription button below as well as the notification bell so you will know when I release that video in a couple of weeks. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.